Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into something deeply personal but incredibly important: emotional detachment. There comes a time in all of our lives when we need to step back from a relationship, whether it's a friend, partner, or even family member, for the sake of our own well-being. Let's talk about 5 key rules to help you emotionally detach from someone in a healthy and empowering way. The first and often most difficult step in emotionally detaching from someone is recognizing that it's necessary. It can feel like a profound realization, and it's one that's often accompanied by discomfort, sadness, or even guilt. But emotional detachment doesn't happen unless we first acknowledge that the current dynamic isn't serving us. This process of acknowledgement isn't about giving up on someone or admitting defeat in a relationship. It's about recognizing that something in the relationship, whether it's romantic, platonic, or even familial, is no longer healthy for you. This can be especially hard because relationships are complex, layered with memories, shared experiences, and emotional ties. You might feel obligated to keep trying or to hold on to hope that things will change. You might think, if I just give it a little more time, maybe they'll come around, or if I keep sacrificing, the relationship will get better. These thoughts are normal and they come from a place of caring, but they often trap us in cycles where we continue to invest emotionally while receiving less and less in return. Acknowledging the need for distance is about confronting the reality of your emotional needs. It's about honestly evaluating whether your connection with this person is causing more harm than good. You may notice that you're constantly drained after interacting with them, or that you feel anxious when thinking about them. Maybe you're walking on eggshells around them, trying to avoid conflict, or perhaps your self-esteem has taken a hit because of their words or actions. All of these are red flags that your emotional health is being compromised. What makes this step particularly challenging is that you may still care deeply about the person. The emotional investment you've made doesn't just disappear overnight. It's natural to feel conflicted, torn between wanting to be there for them and knowing that their presence in your life is creating emotional turmoil for you. There may be feelings of responsibility, a fear of abandonment, or a hope that the person will change. These emotional complexities can make it difficult to simply let go. On top of that, our culture often places immense value on perseverance in relationships, whether it's the idea that family is forever or that true love endures all hardships. We are conditioned to believe that walking away or creating emotional distance is somehow selfish or a sign of failure. This conditioning can make it even harder to acknowledge when we need to step back, as we feel like we're betraying not just the person, but also our own values. It's important, however, to realize that needing space isn't an indication of weakness or failure. It's a recognition that your emotional resources are finite. You can't keep giving endlessly if you're not being replenished. And while detaching from someone can feel like you're abandoning them, it's often the healthiest choice you can make for both parties. Sometimes distance allows for growth both for you and for them. When you start to acknowledge that you need emotional distance, you may experience feelings of grief or loss. It's okay to mourn the relationship as it once was, or the potential you thought it had. But it's also crucial to acknowledge that clinging to what could be rather than facing what is only delays your healing. Holding on to the hope that things will change might feel comforting in the short term, but it often keeps us stuck in emotionally unfulfilling or even harmful situations for much longer than we should be. Moreover, acknowledging the need for distance doesn't necessarily mean you have to cut the person out of your life completely, although that may be necessary in some cases. It can mean taking a step back, reducing your emotional involvement, or putting up boundaries that allow you to protect your energy. The key is recognizing when the relationship is no longer nourishing your emotional health and giving yourself permission to take the necessary steps to protect yourself. The hardest part is coming to terms with the fact that not all relationships are meant to last forever in their current form, and that's okay. This acknowledgement is not about rejecting the person, but rather about understanding that the current state of your emotional connection with them is no longer sustainable for your well-being. It's about being honest with yourself, taking a step back to assess how this relationship is affecting you, and realizing that your emotional health deserves as much care and attention as anyone else's. Once you've acknowledged the need for emotional distance, the next essential step is to establish boundaries. Setting boundaries isn't just an act of self-preservation, but a vital process for reclaiming your personal space, both mentally and emotionally. Boundaries are often misunderstood as rigid walls meant to keep others out, but in reality, they are guidelines you create to protect your well being while still maintaining a sense of connection with the world around you. They allow you to define what you are comfortable with, and more importantly, what you are not willing to tolerate. Creating boundaries begins with understanding your emotional limits. In relationships, it's easy to fall into patterns of overgiving where you prioritize the other person's needs at the expense of your own. Maybe you found yourself constantly available for someone, always offering a listening ear or feeling obligated to solve their problems. This kind of emotional overinvestment can lead to burnout, frustration, and even resentment. Setting boundaries helps you prevent that emotional depletion by giving you the space to care for yourself without feeling responsible for someone else's emotional state. One of the key challenges of setting boundaries is overcoming the fear of how the other person will react. You might worry that they will be upset, angry, or hurt when you begin to distance yourself or assert your limits. It's normal to feel anxious about this, especially if you're used to being the person who is always available or the one who sacrifices your own needs to keep the peace. But boundaries are not about hurting someone else, they're about safeguarding your emotional health and ensuring that the relationship, if it is to continue, exists on healthier terms. If someone reacts negatively to your boundaries, it's often a sign that they were benefiting from your lack of them. In relationships where emotional enmeshment is present, where your emotions are deeply intertwined with another person's, boundaries are even more critical. Without them, it's easy to lose your sense of self as your identity becomes tied to the other person's expectations, desires, or emotional state. You might find yourself constantly adjusting your behavior to avoid conflict, suppressing your own feelings to accommodate theirs, or putting their needs above your own without question. Establishing clear boundaries helps you break free from this cycle by reminding both you and the other person that your emotional well-being matters too. Boundaries aren't just about limiting physical proximity or communication, they're about emotional regulation as well. You might still be in contact with the person, but emotionally, you need to establish a line between where their feelings end and yours begin. This could involve not taking on their emotional burdens, not allowing them to dominate conversations with negativity, or not feeling obligated to offer support whenever they reach out. It's about recognizing that their emotional state is not your responsibility to manage. Another important aspect of boundaries is consistency. It's one thing to set a boundary, but it's another to enforce it. Often we set boundaries and then, out of guilt or habit, allow them to be violated. You might tell yourself that you're going to limit contact with someone only to find yourself responding to every text or call. Or perhaps you decide that you won't engage in certain conversations that trigger emotional pain, but then allow yourself to be pulled back into them. When you establish a boundary, it's crucial to hold firm to it, not just for the other person's understanding, but for your own mental clarity. Consistency shows both you and the other party that your boundaries are non-negotiable and necessary for your well-being. It's also important to understand that setting boundaries doesn't make you selfish or unkind. Society often equates self-care with selfishness, especially in relationships where we've been conditioned to give endlessly. But boundaries are an essential part of maintaining healthy, balanced relationships. They're not about pushing people away, but about creating a structure where the relationship can be more respectful, equitable, and sustainable in the long run. By setting boundaries, you're not saying that the other person is unworthy of your time or affection. You're simply saying that you are worthy of protecting your emotional energy. When you set boundaries, you may feel an initial sense of discomfort. This is natural, especially if you're not used to asserting your needs. You may question yourself, wondering if you're being too harsh or if you're expecting too much. But boundaries are deeply personal. They're about what you need to feel safe and emotionally healthy. What works for someone else may not work for you, and that's okay. The key is to listen to your inner voice and honor your own needs, even if that means stepping outside of your comfort zone. Sometimes boundaries need to be flexible, but not in a way that compromises your well-being. For example, there may be times when life circumstances require you to adjust your boundaries temporarily. However, this flexibility should be based on your comfort and willingness, not out of pressure or obligation. The moment you feel that your emotional boundaries are being compromised, it's important to reassess and reestablish them to ensure that you're not slipping back into unhealthy patterns. Finally, it's essential to remember that boundaries are a form of self-respect. They are not punishments for the other person, nor are they a way of controlling the relationship. Instead, they are a reflection of how much you value your emotional health and your personal space. By setting boundaries, you are taking control of your emotional landscape, ensuring that you have the mental and emotional bandwidth to live a fulfilling life without being weighed down by the demands or emotional needs of others. When you're emotionally attached to someone, it's incredibly easy for your thoughts, energy, and time to revolve around them, often at the expense of your own well being. One of the most powerful steps in emotionally detaching from someone is learning how to redirect that focus back onto yourself and the things that uplift and nourish you. This isn't just about distraction or avoidance, it's about intentionally reclaiming your emotional and mental energy and investing it into areas of your life that truly matter and contribute to your personal growth. Emotional attachment often creates an imbalance where your priorities shift from self care to maintaining or repairing the relationship. You might find yourself constantly thinking about how to fix the relationship, how to make the other person happy, or how to prevent conflict. Your emotional state becomes dependent on the other person's behavior, mood, or presence, and this creates a cycle where their actions dictate your sense of peace, joy, or fulfillment. Over time, this not only drains you, but can also diminish your sense of self. Redirecting your focus means breaking the cycle by consciously choosing to invest in yourself. It begins with recognizing that your happiness and emotional stability shouldn't be tied to another person. While relationships can enrich our lives, they shouldn't become the sole source of our emotional fulfillment. When you find yourself overly fixated on someone else, whether it's through worrying about them, constantly checking in on them, or replaying conversations in your mind, these are signs that your focus has shifted too far outward. Redirecting it inward is about reclaiming the space in your mind and heart that has been overtaken by someone else's influence. One of the most effective ways to redirect your focus is by pouring your energy into activities that bring you joy and fulfillment independent of the relationship. What are the things that used to light you up before this person became such a central figure in your life? Was it a hobby, a passion, or a personal goal that may have taken a backseat? Perhaps there are dreams or projects you've been putting off because your emotional energy was tied up in the relationship. Now is the time to return to those things, to rediscover what makes you feel alive and connected to yourself. Investing in your personal growth is another vital way to shift your focus. This could mean taking up a new skill, setting new career goals, or dedicating time to self-improvement through reading, education, or self-reflection. Personal growth activities not only keep you busy, but also provide a sense of accomplishment and purpose that is completely independent of anyone else's influence. The more you focus on bettering yourself, the more you'll realize that your sense of worth and fulfillment comes from within, not from external validation or the emotional ups and downs of a relationship. Physical self-care is also a powerful tool for redirecting your focus. Exercise, meditation, or any kind of movement can help release pent-up emotions and reduce stress. When you're emotionally attached to someone, your body can carry a lot of the weight of that attachment in the form of tension, anxiety, or fatigue. By engaging in activities that promote physical well-being, such as yoga or running, or something as simple as taking long walks in nature, you're not only caring for your body, but also clearing your mind. Physical movement has the added benefit of helping to reset your emotional state, allowing you to process feelings in a healthy way and create mental distance from the person you're detaching from. Beyond hobbies and personal growth, relationships with other people can serve as an important area to redirect your focus. When you're caught up in an emotionally intense relationship, it's easy to neglect other connections in your life, whether it's with friends, family, or even colleagues. Reconnecting with these people can remind you that there are many sources of love, support, and joy in your life outside of the person you are detaching from. By strengthening these other relationships, you create a broader emotional support system that doesn't rely so heavily on a single person. Moreover, redirecting your focus doesn't necessarily mean you have to fill every moment of your day with activities or distractions. Sometimes it's about allowing yourself the space to simply be. Taking time for solitude and reflection can be incredibly healing. When you're constantly emotionally invested in someone else, your thoughts can become cluttered with their issues, their needs, or your concerns about them. Spending time alone can help you clear your mind, reconnect with your own desires and needs. and remember who you are outside of the relationship. Solitude is not about isolating yourself, but about reclaiming your personal space emotionally and mentally. Redirecting your focus also involves shifting your mindset from what you're losing to what you stand to gain. Emotional attachment often keeps us stuck in a place of scarcity, where we're focused on the fear of losing someone or the discomfort of change. But when you shift your perspective to see detachment as an opportunity for personal growth, healing, and new experiences, it becomes much easier to let go. You begin to understand that emotional freedom allows for new possibilities, new relationships, new opportunities, and a deeper connection with yourself. Mindfulness and meditation can play a critical role in helping you redirect your focus. By practicing mindfulness, you can become more aware of where your thoughts are going throughout the day. When you notice that your mind is constantly drifting back to the person you're trying to detach from, mindfulness allows you to gently redirect those thoughts. Meditation, in particular, can help you train your mind to stay present, to focus on your own breath, your own body, and your own emotions, rather than getting lost in thoughts about someone else. It's also important to recognize that redirecting your focus is not a one-time action, but an ongoing process. You might find that even after setting the intention to focus on yourself, your thoughts will still occasionally drift back to the person. This is normal and doesn't mean that you're failing at emotional detachment. The key is to be patient with yourself and to gently guide your focus back to your own life whenever you notice it slipping. Over time, as you consistently invest more in yourself, the emotional hold that the other person has over you will naturally begin to weaken. Finally, redirecting your focus is about building a life that excites and fulfills you on its own terms. It's about creating a sense of purpose and joy that doesn't depend on any one person or relationship. When you do this, you not only detach from the emotional hold of the person, but also create a foundation for future relationships that are healthier, more balanced, and less dependent on emotional enmeshment. One of the most challenging aspects of emotionally detaching from someone is learning to stop ruminating on the past. When we're emotionally attached to someone, our minds often get caught in a loop, replaying old memories, conversations, or situations over and over again. This habit of ruminating can feel almost automatic, as if our thoughts are drawn back to the past without us even realizing it. However, this constant revisiting of what has already happened can trap us in emotional cycles that prevent healing, growth, and the ability to truly move forward. Ruminating on the past is typically driven by a desire to make sense of things, to find answers to questions like what went wrong, or how could things have been different. We replay conversations, analyze interactions, and sometimes even blame ourselves for not seeing things sooner or for the role we played in the relationship. This mental process can feel like an attempt to gain closure, but more often than not, it keeps us stuck in a space where emotional pain is continuously reactivated. Instead of providing clarity or resolution, ruminating tends to deepen feelings of regret, sadness, anger, or confusion. Part of the reason rumination is so powerful is because of the emotional weight that past events carry. We often idealize or magnify certain moments, either by clinging to the positive experiences and longing for what once was, or by focusing on the painful moments and dwelling on what hurt us. This duality can create a sense of internal conflict. On one hand, we may miss the good times, reminiscing about the moments when things felt perfect, and on the other hand, we might feel angry or betrayed by the way things ended or how we were treated. This constant back and forth creates a mental tug of war where we feel trapped between wanting to hold on and needing to let go. Another reason rumination is so difficult to break free from is because it gives us the illusion of control. When we ruminate, we feel like we're doing something productive, like we're solving a problem or getting closer to an answer. But the truth is, most of the time, the answers we seek from the past are either unobtainable or irrelevant to our current situation. We can't change what happened, no matter how many times we replay it in our minds, and no amount of analysis will alter the outcome of events that have already unfolded. The more we cling to the hope of finding closure through rumination, the more we delay the actual process of healing. In many ways, ruminating on the past is a way of avoiding the present. It allows us to escape the discomfort of dealing with the here and now, with the feelings of loss, uncertainty, or loneliness that often accompany emotional detachment. Instead of sitting with those emotions and allowing ourselves to process them, we retreat into the past because it feels familiar even if it's painful. The past, for all its complexities, is something we know. It's already happened. And in that sense, it feels safer than the unknown territory of the future. But staying mentally anchored in the past prevents us from engaging fully with the present and moving forward with our lives. To break free from rumination, it's important to first recognize when it's happening. Often, rumination can feel like it's happening to us as if our thoughts are beyond our control. But by practicing mindfulness and self-awareness, we can begin to notice when our minds start drifting back to the past. Once we recognize the pattern, we can gently guide our thoughts back to the present. This doesn't mean suppressing or ignoring the emotions associated with the past, but rather acknowledging them without getting lost in them. It's about observing your thoughts without letting them consume you. One effective way to avoid rumination is by focusing on what you've learned from the past rather than dwelling on the events themselves. Instead of replaying a particular argument or wondering how things could have been different, try to identify the lessons you've gained from the experience. What did the relationship teach you about yourself, about your needs, your boundaries, or your values? Shifting your focus from the events of the past to the personal growth that has come from those experiences can help you see the situation in a more constructive light, allowing you to move forward with greater clarity and self-awareness. Another strategy for avoiding rumination is to actively redirect your attention to the present moment. This can be done through mindfulness practices such as meditation, deep breathing, or grounding exercises that help bring your focus back to the here. Engaging in activities that require your full attention, whether it's a creative hobby, physical exercise, or spending time with friends, can also help break the cycle of rumination by giving your mind something else to focus on. The more you engage with the present, the less power the past will have over you. It's also important to recognize that rumination is often fueled by unresolved emotions, such as anger, sadness, or guilt. If you find yourself repeatedly revisiting certain events or conversations, it may be because there are underlying feelings that you haven't fully processed. In these cases, it can be helpful to find healthy ways to express those emotions, whether through journaling, talking to a trusted friend, or seeking professional support from a therapist. Sometimes the act of externalizing your thoughts, getting them out of your head and into the open, can help you release the emotional grip they have on you. Forgiveness plays a significant role in letting go of rumination, both in terms of forgiving the other person and forgiving yourself. Holding onto grudges or unresolved anger keeps you emotionally tethered to the past as your mind continues to seek justice or closure that may never come. Forgiveness doesn't mean condoning the other person's behavior or pretending that everything is okay. It's about freeing yourself from the burden of carrying that emotional weight. Similarly, self-forgiveness is essential if you find yourself ruminating over your own actions or decisions. It's easy to look back with the clarity of hindsight and criticize yourself for not seeing things sooner or for making certain mistakes. But self-compassion is key to moving forward. One of the most powerful realizations when it comes to avoiding rumination is understanding that the past cannot be changed. No amount of thinking, analyzing, or regretting will alter what has already happened. So the only thing you have control over is how you choose to move forward from this moment. By releasing your attachment to the past, you free up emotional and mental space for new experiences, new opportunities, and new relationships. It's about accepting that the past is part of your story, but it doesn't have to define your future. This acceptance doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process that requires patience, self-compassion, and a commitment to your own healing. Forgiveness is often seen as one of the most difficult aspects of emotional detachment, but it is also one of the most liberating. When you are emotionally tied to someone, especially in situations where there has been hurt, betrayal, or disappointment, it's natural to harbor feelings of resentment, anger, regret. These emotions can weigh heavily on your heart, preventing you from moving forward and creating an invisible chain that keeps you bound to the past. Practicing forgiveness, both for yourself and for the other person, is not only about releasing them from the grip of blame, but also about freeing yourself from the burden of carrying emotional pain that no longer serves you. It's important to begin by recognizing that forgiveness is not about excusing harmful behavior or pretending that everything is okay. Far from it, true forgiveness requires facing the hurt and acknowledging the emotional wounds caused by the other person or by yourself. It's about accepting that harm was done, but choosing to let go of the desire for retribution or emotional punishment. By holding on to anger or resentment, you may feel justified in your pain, but that very act of holding on to these emotions can trap you in a cycle of bitterness and emotional stagnation. Forgiveness is, in many ways, an act of self-love because it prioritizes your emotional well-being over the need to keep reliving the pain. Forgiveness is often misunderstood as a singular, decisive act, a moment when you simply decide to forgive and everything is resolved. In reality, forgiveness is much more of a process. It involves working through complex emotions such as hurt, sadness, betrayal, or anger, and coming to terms with the fact that you may never receive the closure, apology, or understanding that you want from the other person. It means accepting that some questions may remain unanswered and that the responsibility for healing lies primarily with you. You may need to revisit forgiveness multiple times, especially if the emotional wounds are deep or if new triggers bring old feelings back to the surface. Each time, it's a conscious decision to let go, to release the emotional grip that the past has on you. The first step in practicing forgiveness is to understand that it is ultimately about your own freedom. When you hold on to grudges, it's as if you are reliving the pain over and over again. The other person may have moved on, or they may not even be aware of the extent of the pain they've caused. And meanwhile, you remain stuck, emotionally tethered to the events that hurt you. By forgiving, you're not condoning behavior or letting the other person off the hook, but you're choosing to stop letting those past events dominate your emotional life. Forgiveness is about taking back your power and reclaiming your right to peace, joy, and emotional freedom. In forgiving others, it's essential to recognize that forgiveness does not always require reconciliation. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is forgive someone from a distance. Forgiveness doesn't mean that the relationship has to return to the way it was, or that you need to maintain contact with the person who hurt you. In fact, in some cases, continuing the relationship may not be possible or healthy. The goal of forgiveness is to release the emotional baggage associated with the hurt, not necessarily to restore the relationship. It's about healing within yourself, regardless of whether the relationship is repaired or continues. One of the most powerful aspects of forgiveness is the shift in perspective that it creates. When you hold on to anger or resentment, your focus is often on the person who hurt you and the wrongs they committed. This can lead to a mindset where you feel like a victim of their actions, powerless to change what happened. However, forgiveness shifts the focus from the other person to yourself. It empowers you to take control of your emotional landscape, to say, I am not going to let this pain define me or dictate how I move forward. By forgiving, you stop letting the other person's actions control your thoughts, emotions, and future. Forgiveness also requires compassion, both for the other person and for yourself. It's easy to see the other person as the villain in your story, but often people act out of their own pain, confusion, or emotional immaturity. This doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it does help explain why people act the way they do. When you can see the other person's humanity, their flaws, and their own struggles, it becomes easier to let go of the idea that they intentionally set out to hurt you. Of course, this is not always the case, and some actions are inexcusable. But understanding that most people act based on their own limitations and emotional baggage can make it easier to release the anger and resentment you may feel toward them. Self-forgiveness involves accepting that you did the best you could with the information and emotional capacity you had at the time. It's about recognizing that you are human, that you make mistakes, and that your actions, like everyone else's, are influenced by your own emotions, experiences, and limitations. Instead of beating yourself up for what you could have done differently, self-forgiveness asks you to show yourself the same compassion you would extend to a friend. It asks you to let go of the harsh judgments you may be placing on yourself and to accept that you are worthy of healing and moving forward, no matter what happened in the past. Sometimes self-forgiveness requires you to confront difficult emotions such as shame or regret. These emotions can be particularly painful because they are often tied to a sense of personal failure or inadequacy. However, it's important to remember that everyone makes mistakes and no one is immune to missteps in relationships or emotional connections. Forgiving yourself is not about erasing the past or pretending that mistakes weren't made. It's about learning from those mistakes and allowing yourself to grow. It's about giving yourself permission to move forward without being weighed down by the mistakes of your past. Forgiveness, both for yourself and others, can also involve releasing expectations. When you're emotionally attached to someone, you may have had certain hopes or visions for how the relationship would unfold. These expectations can sometimes create a sense of disappointment or bitterness when things don't go as planned. By practicing forgiveness, you let go of the need for the past to have been different. You accept that things happened the way they did, and while it may not align with your original expectations, it doesn't mean that you can't move forward or create a fulfilling life in the aftermath. For some, it might come quickly, while for others, it can take time, sometimes months or even years. The key is to be patient with yourself and allow the process to unfold naturally. You might experience setbacks or moments where old emotions resurface, but that doesn't mean you're failing at forgiveness. Healing is not linear, and forgiveness is no different. What matters is your willingness to release the emotional weight of the past and move toward a place of peace and acceptance. So there you have it, 5 crucial rules for emotionally detaching from someone. It's not easy, it requires time, patience, and self-awareness. But remember, emotional detachment isn't about being cold or heartless. It's about protecting your peace, prioritizing your growth, and allowing yourself the freedom to heal and move forward. Thanks for tuning in today. If you found this helpful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this. Take care of yourself, and until next time, keep growing and evolving.